Following in the footsteps of New York and Illinois, California has officially declared a state of emergency because of the monkeypox outbreak. Governor Newsom announced the move on Monday, explaining that the state of emergency would help facilitate the state's vaccination drive. As of now, he says there is far more demand for the monkeypox vaccine than there is supply. Meanwhile, and this happened just this morning, President Biden is still, of course, battling through his 19th bout with COVID. But he still announced his newly assembled monkeypox response team. Think of them as sort of like the Avengers, except for blisters. Robert Fenton of FEMA is now the National Monkeypox Coordinator, and Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis of the CDC will be his deputy, his Robin to his Batman, I suppose. I know I'm mixing DC and Marvel. Forget about it. It's a good thing, though, that we have both FEMA and the CDC on the case, because both organizations are renowned for making every problem worse. And I think their vast experience with being totally incompetent and useless will be very important in this case, especially. After all, making the problem worse, fanning the flames, dumping fuel on the fire would seem to be the overall sort of agreed upon strategy with respect to monkeypox. For example, in San Francisco, a day before the virus was declared a statewide emergency, with the lines for the vaccines still stretching around the corner, an annual gay fetish festival was still held as scheduled. Your grandfather died alone in a nursing home because you weren't allowed to visit him due to COVID, and your kids were locked out of school for a year. But gays in San Francisco were still having their sex festival, even amid an outbreak that specifically spreads through those sorts of events in that community. A local news outlet reports, quote, "The annual Door Alley Festival happened Sunday in San Francisco's Soma neighborhood, despite growing concerns about the spread of monkeypox. The virus has been predominantly spreading among gay and bisexual men, who make up the majority of the festival's attendees. The Leather and Fetish Fair draws thousands of people to San Francisco. The event comes after the city just declared a public health emergency for monkeypox as the virus continues to spread. I think the risk is not zero," UCSF infectious disease specialist Dr. Peter Chin Hong said. "I think if people are smart and know how monkeypox is spread, they can avoid it." Chin Hong says that the risk of contracting the virus at events like Door Alley is very low. However, that risk increases based on intimate interactions with others. Quote, "Prolonged skin-to-skin contact and possibly through sexual transmission, although skin-to-skin contact is the main thing," Chin Hong added. "So that's large. In terms of medium, that will be prolonged kissing through saliva, but it requires hours. Hugging by itself, giving a high five, shaking somebody's hand is not going to result in transmission," he says. Oh, well, that's a relief. If you're attending the gay fetish carnival to give high fives and shake people's hands, then you should be fine, he assures us. Anyway, the good news is that the event was also an educational opportunity. The report continues, quote, "Event organizers say they're working with the city's public health department to provide on-site outreach and education. Despite precautions, Chin Hong expects to see more cases after this weekend. Quote, "I expect a lot of activity next week in terms of alerts," Chin Hong says. So to review, this public health expert and infectious disease specialist says that the risk of contracting monkeypox at a fetish festival in a city that's a monkeypox hotspot is very low. And yet he anticipates, purely by coincidence, more virus activity directly after the event concludes. Now, the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, which is a nonprofit which has worked closely with the city's public health department for decades, they issued their own sort of guide for this festival, which they are calling Douchey's Guide to Door, with, quote, "some ideas to reduce your risk and still enjoy your favorite kink and fetish festival in San Francisco." The guide begins, quote, "We're gearing up for an exciting return of our favorite street festival in San Francisco, Up Your Alley, aka Door Alley, where you'll get your fill of hot, hairy daddies, hungry pigs, BDSM babes, and kinks of all kinds. Douchey's got some hot tips for a fun and filthy weekend, free of anxiety." We are then given a variety of tips, and some of them I can't even read out loud to you, and really I shouldn't read any of them out loud, but here's one tip. It says, take a friend to the dungeon. Going to sex parties with people you know and planning on who you'll hook up with can be one way to reduce your risk if you're able to have open and honest conversations about monkeypox symptoms and possible exposures. So make sure to have open and honest conversations in the sex dungeon, they're saying. The guide also cautions that you should perhaps, think about avoiding the piles of gay men having sex with each other in dark back rooms, and instead stick to having orgies in well-lit areas. Also, if you appear to be breaking out in monkeypox rashes yourself, well, then, of course, the guide says, stay home, don't go. Just kidding. The AIDS Foundation recommends that you just cover your bumps with a Band-Aid and head out onto the town anyway. That's really what it says. You could actively be breaking out in monkeypox. Just wear long sleeves, put some Band-Aids on. Go have fun in the orgy. This is the sort of health advice that's being dispensed for monkeypox. Any warnings or suggestions or policies more stringent than this would be shaming to the gay community. We can't have that. That's what California legislator Scott Wiener, whose name will never stop being funny, recently explained on Twitter. He tweeted, quote, "Lots of sex shaming of gay men around monkeypox, the same shaming we saw in the 1980s about HIV. Lecturing people not to have sex isn't a public health strategy. It didn't stop HIV, it made it worse, and it won't stop monkeypox. What will work is vaccination, testing, and education." Well, what about educating people about the fact that fetish festivals and orgies are disgusting and barbaric and are guaranteed to be vectors of all kinds of diseases? Can we educate people about that? No, we can't impart that sort of education. Because it's simply not a good public health strategy to tell gay men to make good health decisions and to encourage them to please refrain from recklessly spreading their bodily fluids all over town. Yet it was a good public health strategy to shut down all of society for a year or more. That was perfectly reasonable, practical, to tell people to stay in their homes and not go anywhere or do anything for months on end. That's reasonable, practical. But telling gay men just, hey, refrain from the orgies for a couple of weeks. In fact, I made this point in response to Wiener, and some guy named Lane Wood, who has a blue check, so again, we know he's important, responded, tagging Twitter and Twitter CEO. He said to me, "Hey, Twitter safety, I know these are not easy calls to make, and technically Matt Walsh's tweets don't cross lines yet. I don't care that he has the views he does, he's allowed. However, we know this is paving the path to violence for his audience." So I didn't say anything wrong or incorrect, whether factually or morally, and I didn't violate any Twitter policies, but Lane wants me banned anyway because somehow the simple truths I'm discussing might pave the path to violence. This is, of course, a common view on the gay left. On Friday, a gay news site, LGBTQ Nation, published an article with the headline, "Monkeypox is not a gay disease, but it is being painted that way worldwide. Touting the monkeypox virus as a gay disease endangers both queer and non-queer people." Now, to be perfectly clear about this, I don't think that monkeypox is a gay virus. I doubt it has any particular sexual orientation at all, though I haven't asked. I also don't know its pronouns. I wouldn't presume to assume. What I do know is that it's a disease which infects gay men nearly exclusively, in part helped by the fact that gay men are nearly exclusively, the ones attending fetish festivals and orgies. That's what I do know. Two other important points I think should be made here. First, you notice how often LGBT people are endangered by the truth, according to the left. They spread this ring of eggshells around LGBT people and demand that we walk gingerly on them all the time. There are a million fantasies, false impressions, delusions that we're supposed to keep intact, a million bubbles we must not burst. This is how the left wants us to see it anyway. But this approach not only places a ridiculous, unfair burden on all of us who are forbidden from speaking the basic truth, commanded constantly to lie, but it also harms the very people it's supposed to protect. The truth that we must shield LGBT people from are, these truths are always and in every case exactly the truths that they most need to hear. So who is the compassionate one, the loving one? Is it the guy who shouts to the person about to walk right off a cliff, attempting to warn him about the plunge ahead? Or is it the guy who tries to muffle the other guy, preventing him from issuing the warning? Which one is loving and compassionate? Second point. There are several reasons why gay people are allowed, rather encouraged actually, to continue running around town having sex with strangers during monkeypox while the rest of us were made to put our entire lives on hold during COVID. The most obvious reason is that gays are a protected privileged class, and therefore they have different rules, and they live by a different set of rules than the rest of us do. But there's something else too, and it's this. The left believes that no right is as sacred as the right to sexual gratification. Okay? In fact, by their doctrines, there really is no right other than the right to sexual gratification. That is every right boils down to this one. The right to be sexually satisfied. Every liberty is grounded in this. According to them, we have no right to do anything except satisfy ourselves sexually. This is, by their view, in their dreary, miserable vision of the world, this is what it is. There is no meaning to life other than the pursuit of temporary carnal pleasure. This is why they can't bear to abstain or tell others to abstain, even amid a monkeypox outbreak. A life without immediate, constant sexual satisfaction is a life without meaning, a life without purpose. It is a kind of death. To tell people to control themselves sexually for even a day is to essentially kill them. That's the way the left looks at it. Because this right trumps everything. The right to be sexually satisfied certainly trumps any concern for safety or health, especially the safety and health of other people who themselves have no worth except so far as they can be used sexually and discarded. This is what lies at the heart of the public health approach to monkeypox, and also, of course, at the heart of every other insane thing in our culture. I know you're craving some more Matt Walsh Show content. Well, I have some great news for you. If you head over to dailywire.com and subscribe now, you can watch or listen to my full show. You can also listen to my podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'll see you there.